Hi, I'm Kristin Omdahl, and welcome back to my show. Today I have a special treat for you. I'd like to introduce you to Chantal Miyagishima of Nititude. So without further ado, here is Chantal. Hi, Chantal. I'm Kristin. It's so nice to meet you, and I appreciate you joining me for this interview. You were nominated by a fellow viewer of both of ours named Mindy Fetterman. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on here.
Thank you. So I saw that you go by Knititude and you are a knit designer. Are you exclusively knitting and not crochet?
Yeah, I can crochet like a lick of a stitch. Well, I can do a double crochet and a single crochet, but that's the extent of my knowledge. I'm mainly knit based.
Okay, all right. And where does the name Knititude come from?
Nititude kind of comes from the fact that I have a lot of attitude. I've been known as being a little sassy. And when I was trying to come up with a name, I remember talking to one of my friends that was at work with me, and he was like, I don't know, like, you kind of have a lot of piss and vinegar. Why don't you just do knitting with attitude? And I was like, what if I do knititude? So that's kind of where it came out of.
It's adorable. I love it. On your website, you said you started in 2012, but really didn't get going till 2013. Can you explain what that means? Is that from learning to knit, or how did you go from learning to knit to knititude?
It really was like, I really got into like a huge Pinterest kick. And I was like, I really want to learn how to be able to do something. I was like, I think that I'm pretty crafty. I'm going to try and figure something out. And I wanted just like a circle scarf for Christmas. And I never got one from like my fiance at the time, my family, anything like that. And I was like, you know what? I'll just make it. I'll go onto Pinterest. I'll just go to the like Walmart. I'll get some yarn. And I learned how to knit. And by knit, I mean the knit stitch. And I probably knit for about a year. I didn't learn how to purl because pearls absolutely terrified me. And then I had a bunch of girlfriends being like, hey, like I would love to be able to like buy that off of you. And I was like, oh, okay, like I can make you a scarf. I'll charge you like this much money. And Knititude kind of just blossomed into selling hand knits, and then it just got bigger and bigger. And then in 2016, that's when I started designing, like late December 2000, like September of 2016. And then it's just kind of taken off from there. And I started to dwindle my actual physical products.
And so where did you learn how to write the patterns? Did you just go by what you had seen other people doing, or how did you go from knitting to writing patterns? Because that's a big
I,
jump too.
yeah, I'm surprisingly, as a person who writes patterns, I never read patterns in my first like year. And even when I was starting to make things for my booth to be able to sell, I never read patterns because I found them really confusing, and I didn't really know that they were a thing. So it was just like, oh, if I put like a knit stitch there and a purl stitch there after I learned how to purl, um I was like, oh, if I do, that's called stockinette. That scarf will become a snake and a tube. That will not look good. Okay, I need to seam that. Like, everything was really trial and error. And I taught myself off of YouTube. And it just like, I remember one of my girlfriends being like, you know, that you can like write down your steps like a recipe and people will pay for it. And I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that was something that was possible. So when I made my first ever pattern, which was called the bum hugger, because it's a big bolero that literally hugs your bum. Um, I remember talking to Alexi from Two of Wands, and I sent her a message because we've been chatting back and forth. I had done one of her patterns. That poor girl, I was like, I don't understand what you did at this point. She's like, it literally is written right there. Um, and I sent her one of my pattern, like my first pattern ever. And I was like, can you take a look at this? Does this look kind of correct? Do I have the things that I need to put in this? And she was like, you are missing a gauge swatch. That is very
Right.
important. So it just like it kind of just grew from evolution, and then from there it was just, I think one of the reasons why my patterns do so well is because I didn't read other people's patterns first. And it was because I have a tendency that as a designer and as a maker in general, I question a lot of things. So even reading a pattern now, I'm like, why did you do that? Why did you put that there? Why am I doing this? And it's a lot of whys. So in my designs and in my patterns, I write a lot of the things being like, you are doing this because of this. Please do not deviate from the pattern because this is a reason why you're doing it. And I think that it kind of gives a little bit more like either experience in garment techniques and like teaching to the actual person who's making the pattern, but also it's like another reassurance of being like, okay, the pattern designer does know what they're talking about. Let's just go ahead and do it. And I find that those little like extra little tidbits are why my patterns are so easy to read.
So you add them as notes inside the pattern. Right.
Yeah, so in
Yeah,
other words,
okay.
like, I'm like, "Okay, like, split for the shoulders. We are now going to work the right-hand side of the shoulder, leaving the left-hand stitches on hold. We are doing this to only focus on these stitches to work this or, like, work this first before switching over to your left shoulder." So it has, like, that kind of lead up that tells you what to do and what to be expecting for kind of the future versus just being like, "You need to decrease." And it's like, "Well, why are you decreasing?" It's because you're doing, like, shoulder shaping to make sure that you don't have a big massive gap underneath your underarm. Just these like little small tidbits that kind of help makers as they keep on knitting feel more confident.
It sounds like from the tone of the way you described it, it sounds like it's a personal touch too. So it's almost like your girlfriend telling you,
Yeah.
your girlfriend's telling you how to make something she's already made. That's really
Yeah.
adorable. I love that.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that like my patterns are pretty yeah, they are pretty personable. I think at like the very end of all my patterns, it's like um weave in your ends, do a block, shove it over your head, and do a happy dance. Like you've now officially made
Oh.
this. It's just like really fun and kind of playful because I do think that some patterns are just like extremely like this to this to this. And I'm like, you're here for the ride. Might as well enjoy it.
What's interesting is that patterns used to be written only in magazines and books, and there it was a matter of real estate, right?
Yeah, you have
So
no space.
the goal was always, I mean, I've been in the industry 18 years and this has been going on long before I got here too. But there was a time before the internet and before doing things digitally that space was so important that you had to cut out all that information. And it's only been over the years that I add a little more to my patterns, knowing that I don't have to worry about that real estate. Only
Yeah,
when I'm doing it digitally, though. When I go into books, then I have to think. But
crunch.
that's a really interesting difference and a different freedom. I think that's really cool.
No, that's very true. I will say that there is a part of me that somewhat scares me because sometimes I wonder if we spoon feed our like knitters and crocheters too much with our patterns, where they're like, "Wait, what do you mean? What's this?" And you're like, "Just Google it, man."
Well, that brings
But
me to another point that I wanted to ask you later, but we'll talk about it now. I noticed that you don't have a YouTube channel and that your videos are really just small reels and shorts or reels on Instagram. And I find that because I do tutorial videos to supplement my patterns, sometimes people expect the
every
whole thing to be in the video or expect it does become a situation where it's a dependency on additional forms of teaching. And I think that's really interesting that you say that. The So my question is, um why do you focus why don't you do the long videos?
No, so the backstory of Chantal is I ended up going to school for broadcast journalism, and I ended up taking radio and TV, and I went through the whole entire process of like having to write commercials. Sorry, I got a Slack message, of course. I got into like writing commercials and filming things and then having to go into the editing booth and having to like go through everything. And I think the editing phase just is so tedious to me at the point that I'm just like, "Ah,
It's so much more work.
it's so much work," and every like, I don't think, like, people, like, really realize that, like, a 5-minute video is at least an hour and a half worth of editing, and
Oh,
it's like it's a lot, and I think with how many other things that I put on my plate, I do work full time as well, um, it just hasn't been on my, like, "I can do this" yet.
well,
So, I
that
usually stick to, like, short term.
Oh, I totally get it. I mean, you have to pick. You have to pick. You can't do everything. And
No.
I noticed that you just celebrated your ninth wedding anniversary this month. So I want to say congratulations.
You.
You're welcome. And I also know that you balance a full-time job. I got to hold on a second. Sorry. I
That's
live in an
okay.
RV with my cat, and he's digging in the litter box right next to where we're sitting. I don't know if you heard it, but I'm afraid it's gonna
It's
show up.
it's okay. I'm taking care of my mom's wiener dogs and my wiener dogs, so I have 4 wiener dogs in my house that they're like a link of sausages. They're just all over the place.
Well, this is too funny. I might leave it in then, but anyway, I felt really uncomfortable because he was just digging, going to town and digging right
That's
next to me.
okay.
I'm
That's life.
sorry. All right. Okay, here he is again. Yes, come say hello and then come sit
Oh,
down.
he's so sweet.
Thank you. He likes to be a part of everything. This is Bjorn.
Oh, hello.
All right, go sit down. Okay, so my question was, how do you balance marriage, working full time, and running this successful business online?
I don't, I cry. No, I'm just kidding. I am very, very lucky. I ended up meeting my husband when I was really young, and my husband really like flips the status quo. So instead of having like me being the one who is usually cooking and cleaning, Todd does everything. Todd cooks and he cleans and he does laundry. He is so unbelievably fascinating. He's so wonderful and so sweet. And I think he's one of the main reasons why I'm able to actually do all the things that I do. So I do work full time and I do work Knititude essentially full time as well. When I think of the hours. But I think it's also that I'm really, really good at setting boundaries and being able to like really prioritize. It's really funny being that in life I am a absolute whirlwind. Like I am a tornado that walks into one room and I destroy everything. But when it comes to like my work and when it comes to Knititude, it's just everything is really put in its place. And I think it's because I've now had Knititude for I think it's oh god, I think 8 years. Yeah, and I think I've just like really gotten into a really good habit of like waking up in the morning. I'm a morning person. I wake up in the morning at like 6:30 and I knit for about an hour and a half and I watch TV and I have my coffee. Then I go to work and I do my own thing, which is I also I'm an associate creative director and I write ads. So that's like a whole entire other section of just like being creative. And then I also when I'm finished work my husband and I like Todd will cook dinner and then from there I just have to eat and I am knitting and I am constantly watching like TV with him. So it's like
Wow.
it's a really like happy balance because we do work really really well together and I think that one of the reasons why I'm able to do it is because he's so supportive and just like really takes on a lot of things. He's very sweet, but he's like you're the breadwinner. You love being able to help people. You love creating. He's like, you also love making money and that is like something that you excel at. He's like, that's something that I'm just like, I'm just here to be able to like cheerlead you on. He's very sweet.
Oh, that's amazing. What did
Yeah.
you say you do at your full-time job? Creative marketing?
Yeah. So I work for an advertising agency. So I write ads for a bunch of companies down in the States and like actual like not TV spots, but social media spots. So I write 15 seconds, 6 seconds, and 3 second spots. I write all the social media copy. Anytime that you see like a banner, I am writing the headline for it. But I've moved my way up to an associate creative director. So essentially, I have a whole bunch of writers that are underneath me, and I just like make sure that all of our stuff is answering the client brief. And yeah, it's a very demanding job, but it's super fun.
Wow, that seems like such a perfect fit for Knititude also.
Yeah,
I mean,
having a marketing
wow.
background is very helpful, like, very helpful.
Wow, can you give our viewers any like quick tips? Like where would you get started if you didn't have like if you were had an on like an Etsy shop or you were some doing some sort of marketing and social media for your knit or crochet business, what would be your first tips?
My first tips would be, 1, figure out your whatever you want your shop name to be, then grab that name on any social media site that you think that you might be on. Even if you're like, "I'm not gonna be on YouTube," grab a YouTube account. I do have one, but it's just like I never use it. Maybe
Mhm.
in the long run. Grab your website, and then from there, use social media as like I think a lot of people think of social media as free advertising, but the best way to think about social media is that it's a social interaction. So people are there to be able to see you, to be able to see the products that you do, and be really authentic and be yourself. People are going to gravitate to you for the things that you like I think it took me a very long time, especially with Knititude, to be able to get an idea of what I like to create versus what people wanted me to create. I think especially when you first start out, you're like, "I will do anything for money." You're like, "I will do a cow hat. I will absolutely do a mermaid blanket." And, like, to me, I dread those things. I'm like, "That is not in my repertoire." It's just not something that I go to. So, a lot of my designs are, like, very simplistic and like beautiful clean lines that are very classic. I use a lot of solid yarn, and I think that I've attracted that type of person towards me that it's like, "Oh, I like the style that you have."
By
Um
staying consistent, you mean?
yeah, and stay consistent and like figure out what you like to do and then use your social media platforms to literally talk to people. I think in I've worked in traditional media, so I've worked in radio and TV, and then I've also worked in social media. And I find that social media is such a beautiful experience because you're not like TV and radio, you're talking at someone versus on social media, it is a two-way conversation. You can't just like you can yell at your TV, but it's not as if the news anchor is going to hear you or like the commercial, like they're not going to hear you.
Right.
Which is really nice with social media being that like people can respond, so like have that engagement, talk to them, be a person, be a human. People want to go on social media to find someone who's a human.
Well, I noticed something on your Instagram that was that I thought was very unique. You show behind the scenes when you start designing something and truly decide whether or not you're going to finish it or not based on the interaction. And I was like, what a brilliant idea. And I've never thought about that because sometimes I get uncomfortable sharing too much behind the scenes because then there's so much demand for how much yarn is it going to take? Well, I haven't finished it yet. What size are you even asking about? You know what I mean? And so I felt like I don't want to distract people from what I'm already doing by showing behind the scenes because I feel like then the focus is off of selling. But yet, if you're going to make something that's going to be a dud, you saved yourself a ton of time. So I wanted to hear more about your inspiration behind that and where you're going with that, if you still use
Yeah.
it.
So I think I've trained it like I've talked to a couple girlfriends that we all do different things differently. Like I remember talking to Ashley from Sorella when she was still writing patterns, and she was like, I find that if I showcase my audience anything in advance, they don't buy it. And I was like, I find that really odd because I've I think I've essentially trained my audience to be like, you see it from the ground up, you see it for 3 months before you can purchase it. And I think that it really depends on like how you kind of shift your audience and what they want to be able to do. Um, the advantage of being able to do it so early is that I can usually have a pretty good idea of whether a design will do well or not, just simply because of my Instagram DMs. Like if I and I'm like I'm very like I'll be like, "Oh, I've made it up to here. I've now put it on. What do we think?" And I like if I have people messaging me being like, "Oh my god, that stitch is so cute. I love the fit on this one, etc." I know that it will do really well. Usually when it's like crickets, I'm like, "Okay, maybe we're not feeling this one." Um, Usually I like will persevere, but yeah, there's definitely times where I'm like, okay, this isn't going to sell as well. So can I pivot? Can I change this design slightly to be able to put something in that people will really enjoy? Is it like something as simple as like a top-down raglan, and then all of a sudden you get like a few people sending a message, but if you put lace, like really simple lace at the bottom, it's like boom. So it's like you can really play with it and see how
Oh,
your
excellent
audience
plan.
reacts.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So you like try and pivot, but there's also times where like even right now, I literally scrapped a design like 2 days ago and I was like, I can't do it, guys. I hate this yarn.
You know, it happens to all of us, whether you hate how it's working out or hate the art. There's always there are certain things.
Something.
Even with
Yeah.
something good, just because you put so much blood, sweat, and tears into something, I could make something that I end up liking, but in the process, at some point, I probably hate it
Hate
anyway.
it. I think there's always a part of every process where I'm like, ugh.
Is this a winner or is it a dud? I don't even know. So maybe I should start sharing and asking for opinions. I love that. I love the way that you interact with people for that. I think that's so interesting. I did want to talk about your designs, but before I talk about your designs, which I think are beautiful, I love how simple they are and with thicker yarn, but yet they're still figure flattering. Like it's all so gorgeous. But one of the things that stands out with all of your work is your photography. Your photography is so beautiful and your lighting is so beautiful. Do you have a photography background? What do you use? What do you do?
That's so funny that you say that because I have struggled with photography because my photographer is my husband. Like,
Okay, so it's
and
not a
it's
timer and a tripod. I thought it seemed like a person.
yeah, yeah. So Todd does all of my photography, and I remember I think it's so funny that you say that because like this was my biggest struggle, being that Todd and I probably got into the most fights that we had, being like, and I was like, "Okay, well, we have to go take photos of this. Like, we gotta go." And he'd be like, "Oh, great, awesome." And it would be like he'd like I will say that all of my photos are usually Todd like at the beginning being like click, 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 click. Do we get enough? That has changed. I think now that I've like prepped and being like, okay, so I have this release at this point, and it kind of helps a little more to have that communication. He's gotten really good at like, I feel like I have like four main poses, and he knows that I'm going to hit every single pose. And before we go out, he's like, what are the details that you want to showcase on this piece? And then we focus on it and I edit it all, everything, but everything is done on my iPhone. Um, I remember when the like portrait mode came out, I was like, Todd, I need a new phone now.
Oh yeah, I went out immediately when portrait mode came out too. I do
Yeah.
everything on my iPhone as well. It's an
Yeah.
amazing camera.
Oh my God. Yeah. And I remember even he was taking like a few photography courses because I was like, okay, I'll buy like a full on like SLR, whatever a big honking camera.
Right.
And I remember him like trying a few things and I was like, just try the iPhone. He was like, this is cheating. This is absolutely cheating. And he's like, I don't have to focus. I don't have to do anything. I just have to put you a certain like amount of feet away from me and then everything just works. So yeah, Todd does all of my photography and I think I really try and get because I live in Calgary, Alberta. It's one of the sunniest like provinces in Canada.
Oh, I
Um
didn't know
it's like
that.
yeah. So it's like you're always trying to find one of those days where it's not like super bright out. We're taking time that like we're finding spots that do have shade in them. So we are taking it. And then I edit everything in Lightroom on my phone. Like everything is on my
Do
phone.
you use presets, filters
Yes.
in Lightroom? Oh my God, that's amazing. I
That's
kind of wondered if that's what you did because in your social media, like you've got a
it's
palette and you've
consistent.
done it so well.
I will say that that's another probably huge tip for social media
Oh
is
yeah.
take your photos in natural light and a preset is your best friend. And a preset is if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's essentially just a filter. You can go and people have made pre-made filters or presets for you that you can load into an app and you can consistent because that's the other thing for social media. I find that like having a consistent feed that as you said like has like a very similar look and feel is so helpful. And I like it took me a few years to finally find the one preset that was like perfect for me. And now I put it on every photo and it makes everything look really cohesive.
How often do you post to Instagram?
I used to post every single day and I now I think especially just like because of the pandemic has been very tiring. I probably since February of this year or maybe March I post every second day. So I'm pretty active but I'm always on stories.
Okay. I mean, you have an impressive 71,000 followers as of this morning.
I
Congratulations. That's
love them all.
impressive also. That's really,
Thank
really
you.
well done.
Yeah, worked my tush off for it.
I'm sure you have. I just reached 100,000 followers on YouTube. It took 10 years and 2,300 videos. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
I see your little plaque
oh,
in the back.
thank
I
you.
love
Yeah,
it.
thank you. It's where I focused. So is Instagram, my Instagram is nowhere near that. My Facebook is nowhere near that. Is that where you focus for social
Yeah.
media? Okay.
Yeah. Instagram is my main like account that I end up going on. Facebook a little bit. And then the other one that I really like focus on is also my newsletter. My
Okay.
newsletter like is full of beautiful souls that are just like so invested in Nititude. And I thank them so much because they make it possible for me to be able to like afford a down payment on a house. Like
Amazing. Yes, that's absolutely amazing. So what do you do in your newsletter? I mean, it's not like just like harnessing everything you've shared throughout the week or the month. Is it like in case you missed it sort of thing, or is it unique content, or what is your point of view in a mailing?
My newsletter list like really consists of like patterns that are coming out and then blog posts.
So previewing patterns without a link to purchase them.
No, I'm actually like when I say my newsletter list is just like really like my newsletter converts is the easiest way to put it. I really push towards my newsletter and I probably should do more work on it to be totally honest. But I say I probably send maybe 2 newsletters out a month.
Okay. And how often do you blog on your website?
Mm, like once every 3 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just like
But you're
I
on
like
stories
I've
on Instagram every day.
every day.
Okay. Well, we're going
Yeah,
to share
like if
all
there's
these links so everybody can find you in all the
yeah.
places.
Yeah. Yeah, my but Instagram I would say is like the one place that I really focus on. And my hope is my next like focus area will be Pinterest. Because I know that
Okay.
Pinterest is like such a great way to be able to like get yourself seen by way more people. It's more focused on like free patterns, I find, versus actual paid patterns, which I'm curious to see what the results will be in that. But it's still a
Well,
great
it's
way of
both,
like
and you can link your shop to Pinterest as well. So I just recently did that, and I have noticed a lot more interaction because of that. And we can talk about that off camera too if
yeah.
you need help setting that up. But
I
I did
love talking
notice
shop.
me too. I noticed that you don't have free patterns on your website, and I wonder if this is also part of not, you know, when websites first started, it was like a demand for the patterns to be free. And there came a point where you felt like you had to do one or the other or both. And I still feel obligated to offer both. Why do you choose not to?
I think just like along the lines of chatting again with like Ashley from Sorella who did free patterns and she was like I find that when I market towards my followers early they don't buy. I think it's also that I've trained my audience to know that patterns are worth money. Patterns are a lot of time to be able to invest
Oh, I
and be
know.
able to
Yeah.
like to be able to make. And I think I've also trained my audience to know that they're going to spend money on my patterns and they're going to get a good pattern. Um I think also because I'm very open with my audience members and like the people who follow me that I do not sugarcoat designing. I tell them straight up that this sucks sometimes, that I am grading this one pattern. It makes me want to rip my hair out. I think I'm just like very transparent that there's a lot of work that goes into it. And by doing that, I think that a lot of the people who follow me realize that like I'll pay for that $5 because I've seen her literally almost cry in a story. Like
You
I
know,
know that
that
she worked
got
her
it.
like her butt off to do it. So I think it's also like the people who have cultivated and the people who have like come together and started following Nititude. I never really went into free patterns. I think it's also I've always been a really big like advocate for like knowing your worth. And I think especially with having a full-time job that I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to be able to get paid. And I do think that there are always places for free patterns. I never like, I don't want to knock free patterns at all because I think they are a great way to be able to have people like monetize their website. I think sometimes what makes me worry about free patterns is that we don't realize that we sometimes start to be like, we start to degrade the value of our craft. And I think that especially as women, this is when my feminism comes out. I think that like we really need to like support each other. And I think that either scrolling those ads 5 more times to be able to make sure that you give more money to that pattern designer or purchasing that pattern. I just always want people to like love our craft and really appreciate it and see the work that goes into it because it's not woman's work, it's art
And
and it's
nothing's free.
amazing.
And
And
nothing's
nothing is
free.
free.
No, just because you think it's free, you've paid some other way by giving your information to the ads or whatever. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
is free. And I've also noticed that the definite pattern, pun on words intended, is that you keep talking about training your audience. And I find that to be so interesting because you're not saying it with a negative connotation. You're saying it from a truly authentic place of
Yeah.
sharing your authenticity and the behind the scenes and everything. And that just evolves into a training so that they know what to expect and are happy to get what they expect. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's really like a trust relationship. Like if I'm going to be giving you a certain amount of information or like giving myself to you and you like the people who come into my DMs are so wonderful. Like I don't get a lot of hate messages. I do every once in a while, but like I think it's just again, social media is this beautiful interaction where it's a one-on-one. You can have that conversation with each other. And I think being able to have my audience and my followers trust me and like being able to like again really showcase the backside of what happens in designing and what to be able to expect. I don't know. I think that my followers will I know that they pay me really well, which is really nice, and I think it's because they value what I do and I value what they do.
It's amazing, and you do beautiful work. I mean,
You.
let's not forget that too. Your
Thanks.
designs are gorgeous, and what I find so interesting is that oftentimes when people use thicker yarns, and it looks like you're using worsted weight and higher, they're still figure flattering. Like, I don't see that very often in the craft world, and you've done an amazing job of that.
Oh, thank
Uh,
you.
and even though they come across as very simple, sophisticated, chic designs, but I've noticed that there is quite a bit of detail work done in there as well.
I think it mainly comes to fit, and, like, whenever I think of, like, my designing style, I really think of my mom. My mom looks like she walked out of a Banana Republic ad. Like
Oh,
like, like, Knititude, like, scope of I guess that's what I'm always aspiring to is, like, one of those things that you're going to be able to spend money on, and you're going to love it, you're going to cherish it, and it is going to be something that you can constantly pull out. Like, I'm wearing my Easy Islet yoke today, and I wear this in the winter at least once a week. And it is always something that I go to. It's really effortless to be able to make. It's literally my best beginner pattern if you're ever wanting to, like, take on a pattern.
right.
Um, but it's one of those things that you're like, I can grab that all the time. I can wear it to the office. I can like tuck it into pants and I can wear it for brunch. Just like a really nice, simple style. And I think that I've kind of cultivated that. I always say cultivate. I know that it's always terrifying to say cult, but just like a really good audience that also loves simplistic things. But I think my main thing is that I really want to pay attention to fit. Like, I find that and that's,
Absolutely.
like, what I keep on especially with, like, the size inclusivity movement becoming so much bigger and realizing that there are so many different body shapes and sizes in the knitting community, and the advantage of being able to knit and crochet is a simple fact that you can modify anything. If you
Right.
find that you're like, "I have thicker, like, upper arms," you add stitches. You're like, "If I have a longer torso," you add more rows. It's something that you can always, like, kind of play off, and I think that when I do create my designs, um I try to make sure that they fit and they work well for, like, a good range of measurements.
Because not all designs do. Some
No.
things are better for different parts of the spectrum of the size range. So
Yeah.
yes, pick choosing something that works for all is part of your skill and talent also.
Yeah.
I've also noticed that years ago people would tell me, "Oh, I love to knit and crochet, but I never wear anything. I always just give it away." And I started doing styling videos after that and showing them, but you can wear it
Wear
like
it.
this or you can wear it like that. And I've tried to help people, tried to empower people to feel confident wearing their stuff. It's amazing to me how many people don't. And I feel like maybe you being your own model, like I am, I feel like that helps, don't you?
Yeah, you get to know your body, and it's just, like, the idea I think something, with Jacqueline Sislak and Jessie May coming out and showing that, like, crop tops I think there was so many plus size women that were like, "Crop tops are not for me, there's no possible way that I would ever wear that because that shows my stomach," and crop tops are stunning on plus size. If you
I
can find,
know.
like, a high-waisted skirt or even over a sheath dress, it's just, like, it accentuates all of the right curves to be able to, like, hit your body proportions so well, and I love the idea that the crop movement has, like, come back, and it's not like, "What up? I'm wearing a belly crop." Like, I don't think I could do that. I maybe when I was, like, 17, maybe when I was 16, but I just think that there's, like, so many different shapes that really accentuate different body shapes, and it's knowing your body first, and I think that's the
Sure, yeah.
nerve-wracking part where it's like, I know my measurements all the time. just being like, okay, well, as a knitter, I'm going to be able to make that size, or oh, that has too much ease in it. I'm going to not do that size. It's just playing around and getting to know your body and seeing what works, and then just like deviating from the pattern because the pattern is a blueprint. It doesn't
Right.
have to be an exact house.
I 100% agree with you there. And I try to teach people that also, that this is a starting off point. And the beauty is you're making it handmade and you can put your own custom, whether it's
Exactly.
changing color or changing fiber content or changing the length of anything. There's so many different ways that you can put your own spin on it. I agree.
Yeah, and making things fit. I do have a like a blog series. It's like how to be able to make designs fit and how to be able to adjust them. And it's probably one of my best blogs.
Oh, I'm sure it is. It's a question that everybody's confused about. Not everybody, but lots and lots of people don't understand that part. And it's not widely taught either. So that makes sense as well.
Not. It's
I
definitely not.
I love all of the pants and shorts that you design. They look so cute on you, and they're in thicker yarn, and they're still flattering. Do you have shaping in there?
Usually, honestly, I don't have a lot of shaping in my
Oh,
in waist, but I really do pay attention to shaping in shoulders because I find
okay,
that's when like a lot of
that's important. Yeah,
designs start to like go wonky and look like a box or look like a potato sack. I really do like doing like underarm shaping, especially in a bottom up. I do like playing with like a nice tapered sleeve, but usually I don't include any shaping in the waist. It's
they're
up to you.
so flattering. They're so flattering still. They're gorgeous. Now, we've talked about the simplicity, but also the tailoring, and I found that, your braided bralette pattern, you had a blog post on your website about it, and I was so impressed with your information about bust sizing, and it reminded me of times that I used to work in the lingerie industry for a while promoting a product, and I learned a lot about bra fit when I would do lingerie trade shows. And when I read your blog post, I'm like, whoa, there's a background here. So I wanted to ask you, where did you learn about that sort of shaping?
I think a lot comes and when I talk to my followers, like a lot of them, I was like, "Okay, I know that you have an upper bust and then you have an under bust, which is where your bra strap is going to be versus like your full bust." But I really like when you're talking about like the apex from like under bust to I would say nip height or like full bust. I talk to a lot of my followers because that information isn't really out there. Technically, if you ever think of like a bra, you think of like A, B, C, D, etc. Technically, the reason why you end up going up a size is because your under bust is different from your full bust. And an A is 1 inch, a B is 2 inch, a C is 3 inch, etc. And I think that having that correlation was really helpful. But I think also there's a few places that you can find measurements, which I think is great. Like Craft Yarn Council is fantastic. They don't have under bust measurements that I can remember off the top of my head. But Sister Mountain has a bunch of really great measurements, and Yisolda, Ysolda, wonderful. So I use these different sizing charts to be able to match them up as best as I can to be able to try them on. And then my testers are so, so helpful with the idea of like, was this enough? Did you find this was enough coverage? Do you think that we could have like altered that here? Do you think we should have done this? So I think my testers are also so incremental in Nititude patterns being way better because they do really like, they're like, this didn't work here. Let's play with it.
So do you find that like what do you do? 5 sizes in a range, 6 sizes? What do you generally do?
I do 9. So I
9.
do,
Okay.
yeah, so I would say that the like community is really starting to again grow in like the size inclusivity movement, and a lot of I would say the more average now is extra small to 5XL. So that's a 28-inch bust to a 62-inch bust. And they usually go in 4-inch increments. So yeah, extra small to
So
5.
within that time, and I would like to hear about the timeline of the testers also, but when someone comes back with that feedback, do you apply it to that one size, or do you change the design for all the sizes or for some of the sizes or just that one? Like, does it end up being something you think it could be an issue in the other sizes? Because not all testers give you the same amount of feedback either. Some of
Yes.
them are better at making things work. So that my
Yeah, so I would also say that I've in my in my testing, I have like over 500 people on my testing newsletter list. I have
Wow.
one
Okay.
specifically for it, and I've probably worked with over like 250 testers at this point, and I have ones that are really, really helpful. I try and get one for marketing purposes as well as, well, just notes purposes, but also marketing purposes. I usually try and get 3 in each size. And I find that usually what will end up happening is that if something comes up for one person, it will come up for multiple. And at that point, um, I have an Instagram like test chat with all of my testers. I usually break it up because I do have 9 sizes for my extra small to my large, because usually I will grade that really similarly. And then when I hit my extra large to my 5XL, that's when things start to usually drastically change, just because
Right.
body shapes start to change the higher that you end up going or the lower that you end up going. Um, so if I will have like 2, 3X's being like, hey, heads up, this isn't fitting here. That's immediate being like, okay, that's 2 people that it's had that issue to. What can we do to alter it? And we alter it in the like test. And then I have wonderful testers who will be like, okay, no biggie, I will rip out my next like 4 inches. I will retry that. Let's see how it is. And I I do have one tester and she was so wonderful. I think like it was for my diamond knit dress, and that was the first time that it like clicked into me that a plus size does not have a bigger head or neck than like a small size. And that
I
seems
know.
it seems so obvious, but when you as a mainstream size, so a medium for me, which is my bust size, I just like never thought of that, and I feel so stupid for not realizing that. But now that I do, I'm like, "Oh, okay," because I made a essentially a full up, like, boxy knit, and she was like, "Heads up, I am getting all of this fabric underneath here. I don't like, it does not feel good. It does not look good." She literally ripped out that piece, and this is me, like, back and forth when I was on my trip in Europe. She ripped out that piece, like, 5 times.
Oh no.
And then we finally figured it out, and from there, I have now, like, always included, like, underarm shaping, because I was like, "Oh my god, duh. Just because your bust size is, like, this big doesn't mean that your neck and your shoulders are this big." The difference between an extra small and a 5X for their shoulder span is a maximum of 3 inches. So even though the bust size is quite a bit different, the shoulder size is not. And
And
just,
I've
like, having
noticed a
that.
lot of patterns don't accommodate that. I agree. I've done very similar neck openings in top down construction, and people are like, well, what about my head? And I really gently and calmly say, well, your head is
The
roughly the
same
same size
size.
regardless of what size you are.
Yeah.
And people are like blown away. You This pattern isn't complete. There isn't, different numbers for all of the heads. I'm like, well, that's because the head isn't where
Yeah, a
everything
head is
comes
on
from.
average 19 to 22 inches in, like, circumference. That's not that big of a difference.
Okay, so one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is your copyright information. I thought it was really unique what you shared on your website, and also really cool that you really took a deep dive into the difference between copyright and patenting and different things. And I'll share the links to that blog post as well, because you even went further and said how much it costs to do the different things in both US and Canada, which I thought was interesting also. But things have changed, and I don't know if they've changed legally, but over the years that I've been in the knit and crochet world, the the conversation has changed a ton about what is copyrighted in a pattern. There was a time when lots of designers said, you can't you do not have my permission to make something to sell with my pattern. And back when the internet wasn't that easy to navigate,
Mhm.
sometimes you look at a designer who is much more established than you and just say, oh, well, that's the way it is then. And that's how I came up with my first information on copyright, is that I understood that my written word was copyright protected, but also that you wanted to stop people from mass producing it. Well,
Yeah.
as you know, and I later discovered, is that you don't really have any control over that. And I've always made it where people can ask me permission to make something of mine with, and because I want to help hand people that make handmade and sell, I would love to, and then use my platform to promote their shops or promote their fairs and stuff. But I didn't know how to do that openly until I learned more about copyright. And so I was wondering, did you actually know this prior to being a knit and crochet or a designer, or how did you learn all of this?
I remember being in Our Maker Life in 2017, and there's like, because there's always feuds between designers where they're like, "You
Right.
copied that,"
Oh,
and
that too. Yes.
I think that's what kind of like led me to the idea of like learning more about copyright in general. Was just the idea like of people like kind of attacking each other, but being like, you can't do that. I put a twist in my t-shirt. And I was like, you can't copyright a twist in a t-shirt. It's a style. You can only copyright your physical like your like like your pattern. Someone technically could take your pattern and take out all the periods and it wouldn't be the same pattern and they would get away from copyright, which always like blows my mind. But I think it was just like having that, like, how do you rebuttal that? How do you have that conversation? And I think there's a lot of myths out there as well, where like if someone's like, oh, well, if I took your pattern and I changed it by 10%, then I can make it mine. Like, yes, but then you're a dick. Like, like
Yeah.
good luck with like good like making like a bunch of things if you're just like constantly ripping off of other people. But no, I went into copyright really to be able to like figure out and do a blog post because I was seeing all these different things of like people and designers getting their backs up, and even like the idea, I think especially as a designer, just like anyone in general, it's just one of those things where you're trying to protect what you have created. And like, don't get me wrong, my easy eyelet yoke, which is what I'm wearing right now, I'm very protective of eyelets, but I'm never going to be like, how dare you make a pattern with eyelets? That's my thing. And I think it was just like kind of trying to delve into the information to be able to give that to other people so that there wouldn't be essentially like fights when it came to um when it came to social media. But yeah, I think because I'm in the same boat, like there's certain like all of my patterns usually say like a limit, like you cannot sell these in our like excess. You can do up to about 10. And I think the main reason for me is just the idea of like mass production. Like you just don't want to have that. Or it's just like ask me as well. And I think the reason why I always have had ask me to be able to have permission to be able to sell the item is because I am again a huge advocate on pricing, and especially if you're selling your like handmade goods, of really valuing your work. And I again completely believe that we undervalue our craft and we do it as
Oh,
makers.
100%.
We
Definitely.
do, yeah. And even just like the industry in general, like you should never be selling a sweater for less than $500. I am a full like you should net you it's so many hours, it's so much yarn, it's
But
so
I'm not even sure that's accurate. If the
no,
sweater
I would say
I mean, if you're used I mean, I'm working on 2 designs for a magazine right now, 2 freelance knit and crochet cardigans, and each one is taking me well over 50 hours. It's DK weight yarn, it's a sampler with multiple stitch patterns, it's very complicated, and the amount that they're paying me doesn't even make me make minimum wage. I'm roughly at
no.
$5 or $6 an hour when
Yeah,
and this is and
right?
this is based and how many people in the world can write a sized pattern with sampler stitch patterns in lace? So I'm sitting here going, This is a high level skill and it's about half the price. I'm getting paid about half the price of minimum wage. And that's just the industry standard. And I'm sitting here going, there's got to be something I can do to change this. And I don't know what, but like,
Well,
it's not feeling good.
I went on a tirade, and that's probably something that I'm probably most known for. I have a tendency to go on rants again on social media, and one of the biggest ones is pricing. And like when I started selling my knits, it was just like the realization that you should have your hourly wage plus your materials, and then a retail rate by literally doubling that or multiplying by 1.75 to get a 75% markup. And the reason why I say that,
On top of labor and
on top of labor. So in other words, if like something costs you like 2 hours to make, and let's just do easy math, that's, let's say, $10 an hour, so that's $20 in labor. Maybe you used 1 ball of Lion Brand Thick and Quick, so that's $10 here in Canada, that's $30. From there, you take that $30 and you double it. Technically, by like crafting in like crafting standards, you either double it or you times by 4, depending on what that markup is. Like,
it's not just about the labor, right? It's about the skill. So it's not a $10 an hour value. If you
what's
are skilled at what you do, it shouldn't be the same as someone who just takes an order at the fast food restaurant. I think that's unfair too. I think if you have a lot of skill and a lot of years experience, you should be making well over $10 an hour to do it as well. So that's
and
very
that double by going from 30 to 60 is also the difference to be able to pay yourself while running your company, because I think a lot of people don't realize that to run a company, it's not just production time. This is time that I'm paying myself for to be able to do this interview. And that's because I
okay.
have put enough money, I've put a like actual retail rate and a markup rate to be able to cover the cost for me to respond to emails, to do social media marketing, to answer questions. Like, I think sometimes when we look at things, we're like, oh, well, it's only because I'm just paying for the hours that I made this. And even then, I find that it's somewhat of a struggle to get people to realize that they're worth an hourly wage, because it is really alarming when you see that price go up and you're like, no one would purchase that. And you're like, cool. Maybe the reason why people don't purchase that is because they don't value our craft. And it's because we have undervalued our craft for how many years? Now
Forever.
you got me
Yeah.
on. Now I'm on a
No,
rant.
no, but you're right. And and I in my from my point of view, I'll say that the demand has been placed on me from social media and the viewers and the yarn companies and the magazines and anybody else who I did freelance work for in the beginning before I established my website and my own brand. Like it was established long before me, and how do you break that? And then because all of your customers and viewers are that's established in their view, then when you break that, you look like a jerk to them too.
Like, burn it all down, recreate it.
And I've heard these conversations over the years from other designers as well, but it's still existent. And I think part of how you're getting around that is you're behind the scenes.
Yeah, and
The fact that
showcasing.
you're showing behind the scenes and showing how much work, like I've gotten a lot of inspiration from you today.
Thank you.
So it's so interesting to hear how someone else we do something so similar and yet come at it from different viewpoints, and it's one of the reasons why I love doing these interviews so much, is because I get to hear how someone else is making it work, whether it's better than me, or different than me. There's always something to learn.
Yes,
I
agreed.
wanted to ask you the question from Mindy Fetterman, the person who nominated you to be interviewed today. She had a two-part question for you. One
Yeah.
was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
So I would say, I think everyone, especially because I work full time and then also do Nititude, the first question is like, are you ever going to do Nititude full time? And I think in the next 5 years, I still see myself like creating patterns, maybe slowing down a bit. I've been pumping out a lot of patterns per year. So I think maybe slowing down and being more intentional of the things that I'm creating, making sure that they really do like, I like focus on my patterns fitting really well, but maybe even doing like more into that and taking a course. So I see myself still like being a associate creative director. The idea of going to a creative director at this point, I'm like, that's way too much. I have too many things on my plate. Um, but I would say in 10 years, there might be the possibility of like doing things full time. I always have this like odd idea that when Todd and I have a kid, a singular kid, we're not having multiple kids. Um, I have to tell that to myself because I'm like, no, I do not want multiple kids. Um, I could see myself like possibly working full time and like working from home as well and just like having a kidlet on the side.
I think seeing the trends in marketing at your day job is probably a good reason to do both for a while, though. Do you find
Yes.
that things are always changing in your day job too, aren't they?
Always
And the
shifting.
trends
Yeah.
are always changing. So the fact that you get that firsthand knowledge, that's got to be something of a lot of value to you also.
No, it's super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Everything's constantly moving, changing.
Then one other question I wanted to switch back to was we never got to talk about the timeline from when you're sharing the behind the scenes while you're designing something to your massive, what do you have,
Really.
500 people that are testers?
Yeah.
And you have an application on your website, so if people want to apply for that, they can as
Yep.
well. And then you send off the design to up to 3 people in each of the 9 sizes.
Yep.
What is the timeline from you making the first sample, writing the pattern, to releasing the pattern for sale?
I would say probably about a 3.5 to 4 month period. So usually, I'll make within the first month. I'll grade for the next, yeah, let's say 4 months, because it'll take me about a month to be able to make the pattern, and then I will lollygag for about 2 weeks to be able to grade it. And then from there, it goes straight to pattern testers. And because I use a worsted weight, I think the lowest I get to is a DK. I hate the thought
It
of
takes much
the thought
time.
of a fingering weight just makes me itch. Um, but I usually give my testers about 5 to 6 weeks. If it's like a DK weight and it's a full sweater, I'll usually try and give 8. And then from there, I have 1 week to be able to deliver to usually Lion Brand. So I'm contracted for them, or whichever
Okay.
like company. And then from there, the next week I publish. So if you have 1 month plus 2 weeks plus 6 weeks, so that's 2 months. Nope, that's more, my math is bad. This is why I should not grade in the morning. Yeah, it's roughly about like 3.5 weeks to 3.5 months to 4 months. And people are seeing it as I'm making it. And then people are seeing the testers also start posting about it.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's probably really helpful too.
Yeah, I love like, and I never
You can
require my
share their
testers.
posts.
Yeah, and I never like require them to put it onto social media, but especially because like my testers, I really use it as like a friend group. Like I really like a public profile is necessary to become a tester for me because one, I want to see if like we vibe well, especially with everything that has been going on in the world with politics. I want to make sure that we align into the same idea as well. Just because as a tester, technically, like I'm going to be endorsing you and you're endorsing me. So I just want to make sure that that's a good fit. And then I also find that like most of my testers are very close. Like we're good friends. We are in a group chat for the like 6 weeks. We're all hanging out. We're like what color did you see, like what color did you choose, like oh my god your cat is on your project, I love your cat. Like there's so many things that I find that we really like gel with. um so yeah, the testing process is so wonderful and I really value my testers. Like I their input is so helpful. And then just like again, having those photos to be able to showcase for like for the size inclusivity movement, like the fact that there are different body sizes. And I love sharing that on my feed. So if they end up posting, then I share it into my stories. Like it's a tit for tat.
It looks great in your feed, absolutely. And to see it in other colors. People like to see it on different body shapes.
Yeah.
You can see that you can understand the shape and the silhouette better when you see it on multiple models also.
Yeah. And when you see it on a shape, on a body shape that looks like yours,
Absolutely.
where you're like,
Yes.
oh my God, that's not gonna look like a garbage bag. And you're like, I love it. Or like,
Right.
oh, I love how that person, like, it doesn't like hit as low on them. Like, I just, yeah, it's
You
nice.
mentioned something else just now when you mentioned Lion Brand saying that you're under contract. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so I'm very, very lucky. Lion Brand only has a few actual contracted designers where we essentially make a pattern a month. And
Mm.
then they also do a bunch of freelancers as well that they constantly do kits for. And I love Lion Brand. They were like one of the first people that I reached out to them originally, but they have been such a supportive company. They also pay the best. They're like, and they're just so loving and caring, and I love Lion Brand. I cannot speak more highly of them. They're great.
That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. And anytime we can hear a behind the scenes view of a prominent company that they're a good company and treat their people well, I mean, who doesn't love to hear that, right?
Yeah, and, like, I think I'm very lucky that, like, they include, like, the contractors that they talk to that are the influencers. I think it's also because they do really invest in the community, so I've been sent to New York to be able to go squish yarn, to be like, "This
Oh,
is the upcoming stuff that is happening. Do you like this? Do you not like this? What colors would you want?" And I also find that Lion Brand is, like, really on the pulse for, like, what is going on, in the world, and they do really like try and make it like an effort to be a company that is like all encompassing.
well, and I love the fact that you
Lion Brand.
reached out to them too. I think
I
that's great.
did.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Now, do you think that your marketing background makes you feel more confident in reaching out to people like that?
I'm a pretty confident person in the first place, so that's very helpful. And I think it's also just like knowing that the worst thing that they could say is no.
Correct. Absolutely.
And then you don't know if that no is going to be for just this time. Like the chances of it being a no forever is very low. You can just be
Right.
like,
Still can be a seed for later. I agree with that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and you just never I think that especially if you are going to be reaching out to yarn brands, just have that conversation of like, "This is a two-way. What can I give you if you can give me this?" Like, it has to be mutual, otherwise yarn companies are like, "No, thanks."
Well, they get enough. I mean, they probably get enough emails and enough requests anyway that, they're it's all about your presentation. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
I thoroughly enjoyed getting to talk to you today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your super busy schedule
Oh,
to
of
talk to
course.
me and share so many interesting parts of your business with my viewers.
No, of
I would
course.
love to talk to you again another time. Maybe we can check back in a couple of months because I'd love to hear
I'm
what
in.
you're doing next. But I just want to thank you so much for all of this. This has been so interesting, and I can't wait to share all of the wonderful things you do with my viewers too.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on. I'm honored.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day. Isn't Chantal amazing? So interesting, so smart, so put together. I hope you enjoyed this interview with her. I've shared links to her patterns, all her social media, and everything else in the video description below. Let us make time to create, share, and inspire today and every day. I'll see you in the next video.